August 25, 1944. Normandy, France. The diesel fumes hit me before my eyes even opened. Thick, black smoke rolling off the line of 2.5-ton trucks stretching as far back as I could see. The morning air tasted like burnt oil and wet canvas. I was crouched beside the front left tire of my truck, number 473, checking the tread for the third time that morning. My name is Jimmy Dokes, Private First Class, 398th Quartermaster Truck Company. Before the war, I drove delivery trucks in Chicago, ice blocks in summer, coal in winter. I thought I'd seen bad roads, though I knew what tired felt like. I didn't know a damn thing. Behind me, Corporal Lewis was tightening a fuel cap with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since we landed at Utah Beach 3 weeks ago. His knuckles were split and bleeding. Nobody talked about it. To my right, Sergeant Washington, we called him Preach, because he used to lead Sunday services back in Alabama, was cinching down a tarp over crates of 75mm shells. His face was gray with road dust, lips cracked white at the corners. We weren't infantry. We didn't storm beaches or clear bunkers. But we had a job that made generals lose sleep and soldiers pray we'd make it through. We were the Red Ball Express, and starting today, we were going to haul more supplies, faster and farther than any convoy in military history. The only question was whether the trucks or the men driving them would survive it. The briefing came at 0400 hours in a bombed-out barn outside St. Lo. Major Harkins stood in front of a map tacked to what was left of a wall, his uniform somehow still pressed despite the mud caked on his boots. He had that look officers get when they're about to ask for the impossible and pretend it's routine. "Gentlemen," he said, though his eyes barely met ours, "General Patton's Third Army is moving faster than anyone predicted. They're punching holes through German lines. They're taking territory, but they're outrunning their supply lines." I shifted my weight. My back was already sore from sleeping on the truck bench the night before. Around me, 200 drivers stood silent. Most of us were black. The Army didn't trust us with rifles in their combat units, but they'd hand us the keys to 10 tons of ammunition and tell us to drive through enemy territory. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Harkins pointed to a red line on the map. "This is the Red Ball route, 400 miles round trip. You'll haul from the beaches here at St. Lo to forward supply dumps near Chartres. 70 trucks per convoy, 5 convoys per day, no stops except for breakdowns. No sleep except when you're relieved." Someone behind me muttered, "Jesus Christ." "Average speed, 25 miles per hour, Harkins continued. "But that's on an open road. You'll be driving bombed highways, dirt paths, roads the Germans mined 2 weeks ago. You'll pass burned-out tanks, whole villages reduced to rubble. And if you break down, you fix it yourself or you get towed. Either way, the convoy doesn't stop." I looked at Preach. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed forward. He'd been driving since North Africa. Seen things that made him stop talking about God for a while, though he started again after we landed in France. Said he needed something to hold on to when the roads got bad. Harkins folded the map. "You have 30 minutes to prepare your vehicles. First convoy rolls at 0500. Nobody moved for a moment. Then, Lewis whispered next to me, 30 minutes to get ready for 400 miles? I didn't answer. I just turned and walked back to truck 473. The engine was still warm from yesterday's run. I ran my hand along the hood. This Jimmy truck, that's what we called the GMC CCKW cargo trucks, though nobody knew why, had carried me through 23 hauls already. The left mirror was cracked. The driver's side door didn't latch right. The suspension squeaked like a dying cat every time I hit a pothole. But she ran, and in this war, that was more than most could say. I climbed into the cab. The seat was torn, springs poking through the fabric. The steering wheel was wrapped in tape where the original grip had worn away. On the dashboard, I'd tucked a photograph. My sister Clara and her 2 boys back in Chicago. They were smiling. Standing in front of our church on Easter Sunday, 1943, before I shipped out. Before everything became mud and diesel and roads that never ended, I touched the photo once. Then I fired up the engine. The convoy formed up in the pale pre-dawn light. 70 trucks, nose to tail, stretching back into the mist. Each one loaded with 6 to 10 tons of supplies, fuel drums, rations, medical supplies, ammunition, spare tank treads, boots, everything an army needs to keep moving forward. I was truck number 17 in the line. Preach was ahead of me in number 12. Lewis was somewhere in the back. A white lieutenant I'd never met was leading the convoy in a jeep up front, and 2 MPs on motorcycles bracketed us at the rear. At exactly 0500, the jeep's horn blared twice. Then we rolled. The first 50 miles weren't so bad. The sun came up over the hedgerows, casting long shadows across the cratered highway. The road here had been cleared by engineers. Most of the rubble pushed to the sides, the worst of the bomb craters filled in with gravel and crushed stone. I kept my speed steady at 22 miles per hour, eyes locked on Preach's taillights ahead of me. The rhythm of it was almost hypnotic. The engine's growl, the rattle of the cargo behind me, the bump and sway of the suspension over uneven pavement. My hands settled into their place on the wheel, and for a few minutes it almost felt normal, like driving ice back home. Then we passed the first wreck. It was off to the right side of the road, half buried in the ditch. A burned-out German half-track, its armor plating peeled back like a tin can. The bodies were gone, but you could still see scorch marks where men had tried to escape, black streaks on the metal, a helmet lying in the grass. Nobody in the convoy slowed down, nobody looked too long. You couldn't. Not if you wanted to keep driving. By mile 70, the road narrowed. We passed through a village, or what used to be one, St. Jean something. The name didn't matter. The buildings were rubble. The church steeple was snapped in half, leaning at an angle like a broken finger pointing at God. A few civilians watched us from the doorways of half-collapsed houses. An old woman in a black shawl, a man with a shovel, digging in what might have been his garden. They didn't wave, just stared. I wondered what they thought of us. A line of American trucks, driven by black men, hauling the war deeper into their country. Did they see liberators, or just another army grinding their world into dust? At mile 90, the convoy slowed. Ahead, Preach's brake lights flared. I eased off the gas, downshifting to keep the truck steady. The line bunched up, accordion style, until we were crawling at 5 miles per hour. Then I saw why. A crater, 30 feet wide, right in the middle of the road, recently. The dirt around the edges was still dark and wet. Engineers had set up a bypass, a narrow dirt path that cut through a farmer's field, but it was barely wide enough for one truck at a time. We took turns. One truck. Wait. Another truck. Wait. I watched Preach navigate the bypass, his truck tilting hard to the left as the wheels sank into soft earth. For a second, I thought he'd slide into the ditch. But he gunned it, and Jimmy lurched forward, tires spitting mud. Then it was my turn. I eased truck 473 onto the dirt path. Immediately, I felt the wheels lose traction. The steering went soft, mushy, like driving on ice. I pressed the gas not too hard, just enough to keep momentum, and prayed the weight in the back wouldn't drag me sideways. The truck shuddered, tilted. The crates behind me shifted with a metallic groan. Then the tires bit, and I was through. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Behind me, Lewis was next. I checked the mirror and saw his truck wobble, then straighten. He made it. We kept rolling. By midday the heat was brutal. The sun beat down on the metal roof of the cab, turning it into an oven. Sweat soaked through my shirt, stinging the cuts on my hands where I'd scraped them on the truck's frame. My eyes burned from road dust and exhaust fumes. And we were only halfway to Chartres. Mile 132, that's when truck 23 broke down. I heard it before I saw it, a sharp bang, like a gunshot, followed by the hiss of steam. The line ahead slowed, then stopped. I set the brake and climbed out of the cab, joints stiff and aching. Truck 23 was 3 vehicles ahead of me. White smoke poured from under the hood. The driver, a kid named Turner, maybe 19 years old, stood beside it, hands on his head, looking like he might cry. The preach was already there, tools in hand. He popped the hood and waved the smoke away, squinting into the engine compartment. "Radiator hose," he called out. "Blew clean off." The convoy couldn't stop. That was the rule. If you broke down, you fixed it or got towed, but the rest kept moving. Major Harkins had been clear. Every minute we delayed was a minute Patton's tanks sat still, burning fuel they didn't have. But the preach didn't move. He looked at Turner, then at the engine, then back at the convoy stretching out behind us. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. The lieutenant in the jeep up front radioed back. "Sergeant, get that truck moving or leave it." The preacher ignored him. I grabbed my toolkit and jogged up. "What do you need?" "Hose clamp. And pray this spare fits." We worked. Fast. Preach wrestled the blown hose off while I dug through my kit for a clamp that might hold. Turner stood by, useless, shaking. The rest of the convoy sat idling, drivers watching us with blank expressions. 8 minutes later, Preach tightened the last bolt. "Fire it up." Turner climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. "Let's move!" the preacher shouted. We scrambled back to our trucks. The convoy lurched forward again, grinding through gears, picking up speed, but I could see it in the drivers' faces as we passed. The cracks are forming. The exhaustion settled in like a weight you couldn't shake. We weren't even at the drop-off yet, and we still had to drive back. The forward supply dump outside Chartres was chaotic. Trucks everywhere. Forklifts hauling crates. Soldiers shouting orders over the roar of engines. Fuel drums stacked 10 high. Ammunition crates marked with stenciled warnings. The smell of gasoline was so thick it made my eyes water. We unloaded in shifts. Each truck backed up to a staging area where a crew of infantrymen grabbed crates and hauled them to waiting piles. My cargo was 75mm shells and medical supplies. The shells went to the artillery units pushing east. The medical supplies went to field hospitals closer to the front. I watched a medic couldn't have been older than 20 check the crates of morphine and bandages. His hands were clean, which meant he hadn't been to the front yet. Give it a week. They'd be stained red like everyone else's. "Good work, driver," he said, barely looking at me. I nodded. Didn't say anything. What was there to say? I just drove. He'd be the one stitching men back together. By the time we finished unloading, it was 1600 hours. We'd been on the road for 11 hours, and now we had to turn around and drive back. No rest, no hot meal. Just a canteen of warm water and a stale K-ration biscuit. Lewis found me by my Carned truck. His eyes were bloodshot, face gray with dust. "You think we can do this every day?" I looked at the line of trucks already forming up for the return trip. Drivers slumped in their seats. Engines ticked as they cooled. "We don't have a choice," I said. He nodded slowly, then climbed back into his Jimmy and fired it up. We left Chartres at 1700 hours. The return trip was worse. The light was fading fast, and the roads we'd navigated in daylight became something else in the dusk. Shadows stretched across the pavement. Potholes disappeared into darkness. The edges of the road blurred into the fields beyond. And we were empty now. No cargo weighing us down. That should have made it easier. But an empty truck rides rough, bouncing on every bump, the suspension rattling like it might shake apart. My teeth chattered with every jolt. My spine felt like it was being driven through the top of my skull. At mile 50 on the return, it started to rain. Not a drizzle, a downpour. Fat drops that hammered the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. I leaned forward, squinting through the glass, trying to keep Preach's taillights in sight. The road turned to mud. Truck 473 fishtailed on a turn. I wrestled the wheel, feeling the rear end slide toward the ditch. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd lost it. Then the tires grabbed, and I straightened out. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. My heart hammered in my chest. Keep moving. That's all there was. Keep moving. At mile 90, the rain stopped. But the road didn't improve. Now it was just mud and ruts, the convoy churning through at a crawl. I could hear transmissions grinding, engines whining, as drivers fought to keep their trucks from sinking. Somewhere behind me, a truck got stuck. I heard the engine rev, wheels spinning uselessly. Then the sound of a winch cable being unspooled. We didn't stop. The stuck truck would catch up or it wouldn't. By mile 120, the moon was up. A pale sliver cutting through the clouds. Enough light to see the road, but not enough to see what was waiting in the darkness beyond. That's when the fear started creeping in. Not fear of crashing. Not fear of breaking down. Something deeper. The fear that comes when you realize you're too tired to react if something goes wrong. Too numb to care. Your body's still moving, still driving, but your mind is somewhere else. Floating. Watching yourself from a distance. I slapped my face. Hard. The sting brought me back. Focus, Jimmy. Just get home. We rolled back into St. Lo at 2300 hours, 18 hours on the road, 400 miles. One blown radiator, 2 stuck trucks, and somehow, we'd all made it. I parked truck 473 in the motor pool and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. My ears rang. My hands wouldn't unclench from the wheel. A preacher appeared at my window. "You good?" I nodded. Lied. "Yeah. Briefing at 0600 tomorrow. We roll again at 07. I stared at him. "Tomorrow? Every day, Jimmy. That's the job." He walked away, shoulders sagging under the weight of it. I sat in the cab for another 10 minutes. Couldn't move. I couldn't think. Just stared at the photograph of Clara and her boys on the dashboard. Then I climbed out. Found a patch of ground under a tree. Laid down. And passed out before my head hit the dirt. The Red Ball Express ran for 83 days. 83 days of convoys rolling day and night, 70 trucks per convoy, 5 convoys per day. Over 6,000 trucks in total, hauling 400,000 tons of supplies to the front lines. We lost men, not to bullets, but to exhaustion, crashes, and roads that didn't forgive mistakes. Turner, the kid whose radiator blew, rolled his truck on a muddy turn outside Alençon, broke his collarbone and 3 ribs. He was the lucky one. Lewis made it through. So did Preach. So did I. But we weren't the same men who started in August. I remember the day they shut down the Red Ball route, November 6, 1944. By then, the Allies had pushed far enough east that rail lines were operational again. Trains could haul supplies faster and safer than trucks. We weren't needed anymore. They held a ceremony, gave out commendations. A general I'd never met shook my hand and thanked me for my service. Said the Red Ball Express was the reason the Third Army didn't stall, the reason Paris was liberated, the reason the war kept moving forward. I nodded. Said thank you. Didn't tell him about the nightmares. The way I couldn't sleep unless I heard an engine running. The way my hands still gripped an invisible steering wheel in the dark. After the war, I went back to Chicago, back to driving trucks, ice in summer, coal in winter. Clara's boys were older. They asked me about the war, asked if I did anything important. I told them I drove, that's all, just drove. But sometimes, late at night, when the city's quiet and the streetlights glow through the rain, I think about those roads, the ones that stretched across France like veins carrying blood to a dying body. I think about Preach and Lewis and Turner and all the others who kept their foot on the gas when every part of them wanted to stop. We weren't heroes, not the kind they make movies about. We didn't storm beaches or win medals, but we kept the war moving, and maybe that's enough.